Well, thank you, and welcome to our session on groundwater resources in Africa. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Silva Mugisha to you. Dr. Silva is CEO of the Water and Sewerage Corporation in Uganda and has a wealth of experience in implementing water and sanitation infrastructure. He is also the winner of the 2020 WEX Award for Circular Water Economy. Congratulations, Dr. Silva. Well done. And also Dr. Enrique. Dr. Enrique has over 35 years of experience in water resource management, and he will be also presenting on the Northern Africa aquifer systems, and I'm really looking forward to finding out what you will present. I have also prepared a presentation on groundwater in Africa, focusing on Tanzania and Namibia, and I also will give a short presentation on that. But to lead us, I would like to invite Dr. Silva to give your presentation on groundwater resources in Africa. Thank you.
Where is the?
It's right there.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for the kind presentation. Mine is really going to be touching on the few principles that we use to explore groundwater in Uganda. And we know that there is a water crisis, and there are drivers for change to drive us to explore groundwater. And one of these in Africa is the rapid increasing population growth. Urbanization is also increasing. We think that in the next 20 years, urbanization would have grown from about 10% to over 60% in Africa. So the need for water is going to increase. Limited water supplies, surface water is dwindling, and we need to protect the environment. We also have problems of climate change. Surface water sources dry very easily. And if you have a treatment plant there, during the dry season, you can have big challenges of abstracting water. Then groundwater is also being looked at as a potential source to support agriculture. Personally, I have an irrigation system that depends on groundwater. Now, the new development agenda is that we need to improve water supply for the urban areas now that urbanization is increasing. And as we do that, we need to make more water available for irrigation, and without effective availability of groundwater sources, we would not be able to achieve this agenda. Now, African groundwater opportunities and issues, there are so many, definitely. As we explore groundwater sources, there are so many opportunities, so many challenges. The cities in Africa are thirsty of water. Not many of the African cities have 100% service coverage. So there are so many people who still need water, and the surface water sources are not enough, so we have to go groundwater and unavoidably. We are increasing contamination of surface water sources and even groundwater sources. If you find a city where the sewerage system is not adequate and people are using pit latrines or even septic tanks, it goes without saying that even groundwater sources are contaminated. Overpumping, where we have groundwater sources, because we don't have well-developed surface water sources, we tend to overpump. You pump for 24 hours, and you end up draining the aquifer, which is a bit of a problem. So we need to look at sustainable levels of aquifers, and therefore we need to have adequate allocation rules. We need to see how much do we allocate for drinking water, how much do we allocate for the industry, how much do we allocate for agriculture, which calls for effective regulation of groundwater sources. So, and management, where groundwater sources are, for example, at the borders, you have a problem. The other country might complain that you are obstructing and therefore affecting their water sources. So there is need to talk among the different countries, among the different regions. You all know the problem of River Nile. River Nile, the source is in Uganda, but we are not supposed to touch it without talking to the Egyptians, without talking to the Sudanese. And groundwater sources are also like that. So where they are in the boundaries, people will complain that you might be affecting the environment, their trees are drying because of your water operations. So those are geopolitical issues that need to be handled. Now, in Uganda, what is the goal? What are we trying to do? We are trying to strengthen regulation. We have a very strong regulatory system through a permit system so that when you put groundwater sources, the systems, the spacing must be adequate so that when you obstruct from this, you don't affect the other one. We are also in the sustainability standards. There are standards we do follow. And we are trying to prioritize groundwater management, matching what kind of technology can you use to make sure that you don't over-obstruct and therefore affect the environment. And then comprehensive assessment, before you go for groundwater, you must assess properly. How much is available, how much can be recharged, so that you don't waste a lot of investment, and then when you start obstructing, the water is not there. And those are some of the challenges we face, even we as national water, where we have put groundwater systems. Sometimes they do dry during the dry season, and that causes a problem because of inadequate assessment. And we must also promote participatory groundwater management. You have to work with the people. The people must be involved. If you put a source hoping that there will be infiltration so that you can recharge, and people cut trees, then the water will just drain away through stormwater. So you have to work with the people to make sure that there is sustainable groundwater management. Then integrated catchment management, that is also related to participatory groundwater management, to make sure that we protect the catchment and so that we are sure there's enough water to obstruct. So we are doing all this. In national water, we have a mix of surface water, a mix of groundwater, but some of the challenges we face with groundwater are those ones. Where we have only groundwater during the dry season, sometimes it becomes a problem. You pump for 12 hours, then you have to wait for 6 hours or even 12 hours for the aquifer to recharge, and that can have a problem on supply reliability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Silva, for this excellent presentation. I think it captured well the overall context in Africa, and then specifically also what it means for Uganda. I think that was very good, and I think the elements of, that it's a hidden source and it's often not very well understood, also will be reflected in the next presentation that I will hold. So our experts, hydrogeologists, have been involved in 2 projects in Africa, one in Tanzania and one in Namibia. And I will give you a brief overview on the studies we have done there. So we have, the first one will be on the Kimbiji Aquifer system, and that's in Tanzania. And we have, there is a discovery of the coastal aquifer system in Tanzania that was done in 2007. And but the assessment of the extent of that system and the volumes available, that was only done fairly late. And the interesting aspect on that project was that not starting fresh, doing all the investigation and trials and boreholes, the approach was to use data that was already there from exploration, oil and gas explorations, and then using that to assess the aquifer system, the volume of that, to establish a new water source to support also Dar es Salaam as a major capital in Africa. So one of the key elements of the study was to develop a numerical groundwater flow and transport model, and also to establish the fresh and saline water line of the aquifer. And finally, we will also provide some conclusions observation that we established out of that project. The project was funded by the government of Norway, and it was done for the government of Tanzania, Ministry of Water, and Dar es Salaam Water and Sewerage Authority. This is the site where the study took place, looking out at the Kimbichi aquifer setting. And the objective here was to basically provide an integrated qualitative and quantitative analysis of the Kimbichi aquifer to really support a sustainable development and management of this groundwater source. This is the location, that's Tanzania that you see there, and it is right there in Dar es Salaam. And the project site is stretching basically from the mainland also into the Indian Ocean, as you can see there. Yep, so that's the context. Here you see the data that was used to establish the model. Access was used, basically the collaboration with oil and gas exploration companies to also use that information. And here you can see the seismic survey data, the borehole logs that were reviewed. We developed the conceptual model that is shown here as the cross-section of it. And we did additional, there was additional boreholes being drilled in 7 sites to basically confirm some of the data that was established. Just a few more pictures on the site and also the sand that was found there. That's the coastal plain that we were that was looked at, and that shows the extent of the numerical model that was done, and also you can see it really stretches well within the Indian Ocean there. So the core objective was to really develop a fully three-dimensional model to establish the overall availability of groundwater in that area. And that was really done to really support and help develop a proper aquifer development that you can abstract the water so it does not impact too much on the environment. That's another cross-section of the project area. You see the sea level and also the depth to which the assessment was done. And the blue line or the violet line that indicates the main source of groundwater where you have more yield. The main conclusions from that particular study were that there was the combination and collaboration from the oil and gas industry and the water sector, using data that was established in the oil sector that can be used for the water sector. That was really useful. You can use data that's there, which is often the most expensive part for establishing such a model. So that was really good. And also then being able to prepare a model and reports that are really form a good basis for future investment and also planning of the groundwater source management. And that indicates there is a good potential of groundwater that can be used for Dar es Salaam as a potential groundwater source. That's still there, it's untapped, so that's a potential for future investors to look into, and it's a real great example, we think, for this project. Now going further, those are the partners. The next project is the Tsumeb aquifer. That's now going to Namibia. We have also looked at that in terms of using that as a potential to replenish and support the groundwater and water supply requirements in Namibia. And you see that we had significant issues to look at. That was one, to manage the aquifer. There was already some volumes that were taken out of the aquifer, but additional investigation was required to determine how much actually can be abstracted without harming basically the overall system. And here, that's the location of the study area. It stretches over 4 districts in Namibia. It is actually very close to the Tsavo National Park, which maybe some of you know. The Tsumeb was a former mining town, and that area shows there where the study took place. This is also in context of the East National Water Carrier, ENWC, area in Namibia. So that basically from the north, Okavango River, down to Windhoek, there are water pipelines, canals, and also in the middle where you see the red dots, basically that's where the Tsumeb aquifer system is. So that's basically in context to that. The red lines are the planned pipelines for the future. Green towards the south, that's already constructed and can be used as a potential transportation for the groundwater to Windhoek, for example. Here, that's an overview of the exploration that was done in the project implementation. A lot of drilling was done, a lot of hydraulic tests, borehole logging was reviewed and done as well as part of that. So there was a lot of exploration done for that because there was not too much data that was reliable available at that site. Here you can see also the drill rig and also the testing of the various sites. And this is now really the key table that shows you the results from the model that was done. As you can see, the top line shows the initial or present abstraction in that system, which is between 12 and 13 million cubic meters per annum. And based on the study that was done, it was established that up to 18 million cubic meters per annum can be actually abstracted and used from that system without any major impacts. And I think that is the key result from this. So there's also another huge groundwater source sitting right there in Namibia that can be used for additional water supply. And that is for us a huge eye-opener, because it's hidden there. As Dr. Silva mentioned before, it's a hidden resource. People don't think about it. It's and often don't really understand how it can be used. But that's another great example of groundwater that can be used to support African water supply. So that's basically what I told you in that table. I won't bore you with those facts again. And the overall conclusions for us based from those 2 studies are that there is an immense potential of groundwater sources available in Africa to support water supply in the area as a good resource. It's not contaminated. It can be used. And therefore, having also the benefit of using data that may be already available through other explorations that has been done in the past was another really good example. And we think there needs to be more consideration for that, because the investment you can get out of groundwater, we see that as a really smart solution to supplement the water supply for Africa. So that brings my brief overview on those 2 case studies to an end. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to invite now Dr. Enrique to provide your presentation.
Thank you very much. My presentation, sorry, will deal with North Africa. You know, Africa is so big continent that the problems are quite different, and the challenge, of course, are also different, even in the quantity and the scale of the problems. We can see in this table that this is the quantity of the existence of the reserve of water, and the country with more water accumulated in the aquifers is Libya. The second is Algeria. The third is Sudan. The fourth is Egypt, and the fifth is Chad. All 5 countries are neighbors in the same area, and most of them are sharing groundwaters. You can see in this map that the river basins are covering almost of Africa, but there are a big area in this North Sahara, not the South Sahara, but the North, where there are not rivers flowing, and then the hydrologically is a very particular area in the world with a different paradigm of how the water resources could be managed. But I am here on behalf of the Institut Méditerranéen de l'Eau, the Mediterranean Water Institute, that we work a lot around the Mediterranean. These countries are also Mediterranean, and there are two main characteristics. One is countries that are in the Mediterranean area, but have a lot of desert also, but the population are concentrated in the coast. And then you can see in this other map that this is the most the darkest areas are where there are more quantity of water per square meter. The total, the maximum is around 50 meters of water in the north, and maybe also in Congo Basin and Kalahari. But the most quantity of water per unit is in North Africa, and if you overlap this map, you can see that this is especially where there are not river basins flowing through this area. In this table, you can see all these countries: Egypt, Sudan, Libya, and Algeria, are where most concentrated are the underground water resources. If we look at the Mediterranean, also Morocco and Tunisia are medium in this question. Let me put an example. This is in Spain, but this is almost similar. I have not the detailed figures for Algeria, for example, but could be very, very similar. The total amount of water, the precipitation, is 346 kilometers cubic per year, but from this part is evaporation, part is flowing through the river network, and from this network of rivers is feeding the aquifers, the inland aquifers. These aquifers are also returning the water to the flow system and going to the sea around 100. This is less than 1/3 of the total water resources are flowing in the sea, but from the aquifers, only 2. That means that the total real renewable water resources from the aquifers are very, very small. It's almost nothing in comparison with the total water resources. But that doesn't mean that doesn't exist the possibility to take advantage of the aquifers, because the aquifers are providing a lot of water, but any drop of water from the inland aquifers are renewable. Really, you are taking water from the aquifer, you are removing this water from the river network, and then there's some affection in some parts of the world. There's no problem. In other parts, this water that is abstract from the aquifers are disappearing for other users in the river. This picture could be applied up to Morocco, then north of Algeria, or where the Mediterranean basins are they are normally are river with small area, small catchment areas, etc. You see around the Mediterranean, the real Mediterranean basin are short, are small, and the scheme is similar except the Nile. We can see that the availability of resources per capita are very low. Sorry, in the Mediterranean, the south of the Mediterranean, especially Libya and Algeria, are very low availability per capita. And if we analyze how much water are you using according to the availability, is the index of exploitation, is the worst in the world are around is Libya, Egypt, Israel, Syria, etc. There we have one situation where we have a lot of water in the aquifers, but the real situation regarding the renewable water resources is the worst. You can see in this picture is the salinity in the Mediterranean. You can see some places, for example, near Marseille, you can see in blue then the water coming from the Rhone, the Po in the Adriatic Sea, coming from the Bosphorus also, but the surprise is that the Nile is not flowing in the sea. And that is totally red because there are no drop of water in excess in the Nile. The Nile is one of the rivers more stressed. This is the reason of the conflict now between Egypt and Ethiopia with the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. There is no excess of water at all in the Nile. And then for these countries, there are an opportunity. You can see in this graph that in orange is the areas where the water resources come from non-renewable waters. It's most of the desert areas. And in this map, you can see in red are the international basins, the shared basins, but also the aquifers are shared. You can see, for example, the main one in the in the world is the Nubian sandstone aquifer system. Is 150,000 kilometers cubic of water. It's really is very big amount of water. And the second one is in Algeria, and between Algeria and Libya and Tunisia is the Nap del Albion. Is 30,000 kilometers cubic of water. It's a big amount of water. The Nubian sandstone aquifer system is the biggest in the world, of course, and it's under exploitation. For example, for Libya, everybody knows the famous project, the Grand Man-Made River. That this is a symbol for Libya. This is in the notes. This is the map of the distribution system. But this is start the operation during the 90s. The project 10,000 before, 10 years before. But this is we need to wonder if we are really considering a sustainable situation. Some studies say that there is water for 1,000 years, other is 50 years only, but it depends on what is the strategy for water management. We can see that, for example, the quantity of water is, I see that is 150,000 kilometers cubic of water, but this quantity of water would be recharged, and there are no recharge at all. The recharge is zero, and the water, the age of the water is around 20,000 years, maybe after the last ice era, and there really is a mine of water, and if you are developing a demand based on this water, this will be finish. When? It depends of many geopolitical situation. For example, Egypt, I mentioned the problem with the Nile. If Egypt start using this water, Egypt has almost 100 million people. Libya is only 6 million people, but if Egypt need this water and start, then the problem would be very, very important in the next future. Then there are some bad news. One is the water resource, the groundwater really is not a resource. It's a reserve, but it's not renewable. And then we need to take in consideration this problem. Then many times there's a confusion, and we are making very bad mistakes to consider how much water I find in this aquifer, but this aquifer is flowing into the river, and then we have to remind a lot. This is very dangerous questions that we have to take into account. The result of this problem is the overexploitation of aquifers. There's almost everywhere there is overexploitation. Why? Because in the river you cannot take the water for the next year. If you take all the water, it became dry. You cannot take the water for the future. But the aquifer you can use more than the available water. This is the result of this overexploitation is you are dealing with coastal aquifers, is the marine intrusion, and finally the unsustainability of these water resources. We have to be very careful. The demands in the Mediterranean is focused most in the irrigation. This is not the North Europe, it's totally different, for example, but this more than 80% of the demand is for irrigation. And facing the climate change, you can see that for 2050, the expected temperature will rise 2 or more degrees. That means that the demand of water for irrigation will grow a lot, but simultaneously the precipitation will be reduced 8% in the north of Africa, and then that means that the resources will be reduced also. And then this is the problem will be, of course, me pass very quick. This is in the past. We have some water resources. In the future will be reduced. The demand will be also grow. The B would be barrages, dams for increase a little. We need some water for environment, and the balance is the overexploitation of the aquifers, because this situation. But for the future, we will have more environmental needs. The demand will be bigger. Dams could be a little increased, but not too much. And then what happens? That we need non-conventional resources to avoid the overexploitation of the aquifers. Then we can keep in mind that we need to combine both problems: the overexploitation of aquifers, non-conventional resources, classical or conventional resources as dams and transfer, etc. All of them has been managed together, because if not, it's impossible to find a solution. Let me finally put an example. This is in Spain, but clearly we can extrapolate to any. This is near here in Benidorm, is a touristic area. You can see that we have a very big aquifer, the inland, that with an overexploitation. And this was the situation until now. The solution is there one desalination plant. They are also transferring water from other basins. And finally, you have a scheme with overexploitation and without guarantees for attending the demand in the touristic area. Now, after our plan for desalination, we made another plant which has to replace the overexploitation of the aquifer. This is the main focus. But the second benefit of the plant is to give guarantees to the touristic area. Finally, we reach a sustainable solution. And then that means that when we are thinking about non-conventional solution, reuse, desalination, etc., we need to have as a target to recover the balance in the aquifer. If not, the situation is unsustainable, and finally, I think that we need to promote this joint use of water resources by the classical solutions, but new non-conventional, and taking care of the aquifers that could be very dangerous. More bad news could be that sometimes you think that it's cheaper, the water from the aquifers. Okay, it could be cheaper, but you need to consider the environmental cost. If you are overexploiting the aquifer, this cost is not real. You are blind of what is the real situation of the cost. And the risk of big mistakes that are everywhere in the world is not an African issue. But there are also some good news that I mentioned, for example, in Uganda or in other places where there is an opportunity for temporary solution, but you have to have a plan to replace this use. For the moment, I have a reserve, but I cannot live off the reserve. And also, these reserves are giving guarantee, perhaps not quantity, but the guarantee because are there for solving a drought or anything, and normally have very good quality of the water. It's not threatened by many pollution sources, and also the local abstraction allows to save a lot of money for distribution, because you have sometimes you have the water near the users, and this is another. Then combining advantages and disadvantages, and combining also with other water resources, my recommendation is not consider the water resources competing one against other. This is not. This is the risk of the market, that I have to sell desalinated water, for example, and I am competing with others. No, we need an integrated water resources system, and then each source has his own advantages, his own characteristics to have a clever way to manage the water resources. And this is where my questions to put for the debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Enrique, for this good presentation. I think it helped me to understand the complexities of groundwater, and that it's part of the overall system, that you have to be very careful how much you extract, and that it does not affect the other links in the natural resource sector. So I thank you very much. I think this is very important, and now I would like to basically open up also the floor to some questions. If you have any, please feel free to ask.
What makes the desalination expensive in Africa or in the regions when you have infinite solar power? Why you don't install solar farms, power the equipment, and make it like a sustainable cycle of desalination and feed in the aquifers?
You can take that.
This policy is very different in different countries. For example, Egypt is very delayed in the implementation of, because until now they have no clear need, and they are dealing with a big amount of water. Libya started some years ago a program, but a shy program, and they have for the moment a good solution, but they are aware that they need to change the policy in the future. But for the moment, Algeria is doing the contrary of Libya. For example, Libya is the water is flowing from the aquifers to the sea, where the population, but Algeria is doing the contrary. They are developing the land for irrigation and for settlement, the urban settlement, to the south, and they are desalinating water and pumping and combining with the water resources in the basin and moving water from the north to the south. It's the contrary. And then Algeria now is stopped by, had a more intense policy for desalination. And also Morocco.
Stop or stop?
No, now it's stopped.
Stop?
Stop it because financing situation. Yeah, when the price of the petrol went down, stop a little. But the program is clear. The policy is the contrary. In fact, the second aquifer I mentioned is the Albion aquifer, is shared between Algeria, Tunisia, and Libya. Algeria is not using this water. There are some controversy because they are exploring for gas, and the gas could threaten the aquifer.
The question is more on the cost. We know Libya is a mess. Sudan is half mess. The other ones is good three-quarter mess. But the idea is it would seem logical that when you have so much availability of wind power and solar power all along the coast of North Africa and West Africa, and it just makes sense that you use that available energy to drive pumps and desalination equipment and make it like the World Health Organization or UNESCO or the children. Why not create a global organization that goes across states like the English Church? They go across all the states. Or countries where you have sort of like overseeing policies across countries to create something. So why not have out of this thinking and all what we do as debate, create an organization independent of the countries that looks at the creation of desalination, take the water from the sea, and put it back where it was before in the aquifers and in basins. Like there's a huge basin availability in Libya that you can flow the water from the sea into inland because it's sub-sea level. And they create that type of organization that we can start as leaders to drive it so that it solves the issue independent of the mess in the political system in any of these countries.
Perhaps you want to add something, but let me say, if we look to the surface water resources, is more common for. There are a lot of organizations dealing with international basins. Most of them cannot reach any solution because even that the technical bodies can agree for define some politician, then the political decision of the countries are following another keys. Because you as engineer, you are dealing with water and energy, you can find solution, but there are many other factors, geopolitical. Yes, yeah, but for example,
have an organization that decides, like you said in Uganda, you can't touch the Nile River. The Nile River is not coming to the sea.
The Nile initiative
it belongs to the local micro
had
politics.
no problems on the table. Yeah. Once you have a very big problem on the table, disappear. I don't know if you agree or not, but the Nile Initiative cannot face the problem of the big dam in Ethiopia, for example. Regarding the aquifers, there is a project, a common project between Sudan, Chad, Egypt and Libya for the governance of the aquifer. Also between Libya, Tunisia and Algeria for the other aquifer. There is an organization, an agreement, while the problems are not very important. Once the problems are very important, the question is a political question. And it's impossible to have an organization with more power than the countries. This is, it doesn't exist in the world. And then...
it doesn't exist, but it can be created where you can have overseeing on a global level of an infrastructure.
Theoretically, it's possible, but the real, there are no examples in the world. For example, the Mekong River in Asia has an organization very important, very powerful, until they find some problems with Laos initiative for new dams, etc. Then it's broken.
Can I just intervene here? I can see my brother here is from Canada, and where things are very organized, and is trying to push my brother here into a solution which I also personally believe it won't work, because you can't delink politics from any organization. They are always interlinked. If politics are bad, you cannot think of doing anything amidst bad politics. Because, okay, if you got an independent organization and it invests, who will pay for the investment? The investment has to be paid by the people. And where will the people get money when the economy is bad because of politics?
If you create water distribution system, you create a new settlement and you create a new microeconomics zones. And then that microeconomic zone will be a place where you can export
Where do you get an investor willing to do that in an environment where the politics are bad?
If you create the organization, you will have a lot of private investors that are really eyeing to do something in Africa, but they just can't see any economic zones that are viable. We as private companies will be interested to do something that will create employment, that will help us to lower the cost of production. And I'm sure there are
you cannot do all that you are saying if the politics is not correct. Because it is politics that drive the economy of the country.
But if you have a cross-country, like management of the, it seems the most serious issue in Africa, or like all the countries, is the viability of creating sustainable economic zones, and it's largely driven by not having the availability of the resources, like water resources. And if it can be made independent of the local countries by having like you have the African Union, that could be a place where they can have policies that cross countries. That is not, the water is not governed by the local countries' governments, but it's by a global union organization, then supported with the economy. It's about, in the end, it's about economy. If you create a place where you can plant rice, you can plant other produce that can be sustainable in some zones, then investors from all over the world will come and create those farms. Like, talking about in the UK, they're saying we don't need farms because of what is going on with the Brexit and all that. But Africa has vast land. And if you can bring back the water, you can cultivate the land. And it would just take about organization that's independent of the local governments and wars and the things that go with it.
I'm sorry, but I am not agree with the concept of local government. The government, each country has sovereignty, and no one can impose anything without any agreement. And then this is concept of local, no? Each country is one country. And you can like or not the politicians they are bad. If you don't agree something, you cannot impose an over-organization. There is no examples in the world. Dealing with water, dealing with energy is the same. And then if you want to impose something, you will fail. There are no examples.
If you create an example in one country, the youth and the residents of the other countries will see the impact, and they will put the pressure on their government regardless. And then two, you have to make it like you're pulling them, not pushing them. You have to create incentive, economic incentive. At the end of the day, they need aid. They need foreign aid. They need funding. And then what you do is you make the fund available based on meeting certain objectives that will create that.
I just have a comment on that. I think water as a resource, the aquifers, also the rivers, I mean, they're cross-country. They're not sticking to the boundaries. So I think also the pressure you're facing, they will have to be solved, and then countries are forced to work together as well. And I would like to ask you, Dr. Silva, just to explain, I mean, with Uganda, you have also a lot of countries around you, which you probably have to work with in terms of making sure water supply solutions are achieved. Maybe you can tell us about experience which worked well, maybe as well in that context.
Well, yeah, we do work with many countries around the usage of River Nile, for example, through the River Nile initiative. But as my colleague has said, there are issues which now start becoming bigger than the initiative itself. For example, the issue of the dam in Ethiopia versus the water issues in Egypt and partly Sudan. Sometimes they are a bit bigger than the initiative, the Nile initiative itself. But in Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Sudan, I think there are certain parameters we have agreed to work with. For example, Egypt takes interest in the way we use River Nile, for example, and you must normally demonstrate that whatever you want to do is not going to affect their downstream activities. And it is easy to demonstrate that. The problem comes when the interests of a country are so huge that the other country feels that their economic interests might also be affected by your own interests. And I think that's where the issue of the dam in Ethiopia was. The amount of water coming from the Ethiopian side joining River Nile is much more than the amount of water coming from Uganda. So when Ethiopia planned to put a dam, I think there were issues. There were issues, but I think they have been resolved. And so it's possible to work together, but it's also possible that some of your economic activities can easily be misunderstood, or they can be looked at as a risk to the already existing economic activities of the other country. And in that case, there is always a lot of talking. And that's where the regional initiatives like the African Union comes in, creating a platform for people to sit and talk. But they also have their own limitations, because countries are sovereign. Countries are sovereign, and you cannot impose anything on a country. At least the systems are not in place. For example, there is no joint security system in the African Union, that if there's a problem, then the joint security system can prevail over the other country. So there are so many challenges.
Yeah, but it seems like if you can have like an organization independent of the countries that put rules and policies on countries, that would help to create the sustainable model where you use the energy available.
Maybe you need to tell us, where have you seen that? What you are talking about?
You have, in other sectors, on the environment, on the seas, controlling the marine and fishing, and those are independent of countries. They put the rules on the countries.
I don't think you can talk about it. You can talk about any independence in Africa, that you can put anything that will be independent of the sovereignty of countries. It won't work. It won't work. You have to somehow link it up.
Yeah.
Yes. I think important message is, countries have to work together to get proper and good solutions that are sustainable for the water supply as well. I think we have time for another question. Is anyone?
I wanted to make an observation.
Sure.
You are doing very good work in Tanzania and Namibia. And to me, what you are doing looks to be like mining. You want to start mining groundwater. I want you to assure us that if you mine this resource, which is non-renewable, that you wouldn't be creating problems. Some people in Africa think that River Chad, rather Lake Chad dried because they let Gaddafi did that man-made river he made. So when you think of deep underground obstruction, people start wondering, they start suspecting that you might affect their water resources, and that can also cause problems. So what can you explain whether you have done a sufficient environmental impact assessment to see that the activities you are proposing won't affect the existing water resources?
Yes, thanks, and that's definitely a rightful concern. And I think basis of the whole study was a very detailed and extensive model that is to understand the aquifer and also the volumes that are within that. And then basically scenarios were undertaken to determine which abstraction levels are still considered appropriate without any major impacts on the environmental impacts around that area. So, and certain levels were established where if you go over that, then you will have significant environmental impacts in the region. So there was significant effort done to actually confirm that you will not exceed this specific amount that you can abstract without impacting on the environment. So it was done under that objective to really not take out more than it can actually provide for out of that aquifer. So yes, I want to confirm that definitely environmental impacts and also the level of water that can be extracted has been carefully determined, and it is still considered as a good option to add to the overall supply for example, for Dar es Salaam or for in the Namibia region. But it's one part of it, and it can be definitely I think a smart solution as a combined approach to the system, but not obviously it has to be carefully evaluated and checked, but that has been done under that study, and it's only the first proper stage in terms of preparing the model, but the various next steps need to be then followed through as well. Yeah, thanks.
I would like to add one question, because you mentioned the man-made river, for example. Which is the environmental impact of the project? In the short term, there is not the short term, but you are creating a demand for the future, and a lot of people is living from the agriculture in some desert areas, and then the impact will be later because when the water start to be restricted, and then you cannot make disappear the population. The demand will be there, and then this demand will have an impact. How? You have to move water from like Algeria, from the sea to the inner desert, desalinating water and creating emissions for maintaining these irrigation areas in the desert, for example, but this is in the future, not now. And then it's more complicated that returning to the global authorities. No countries, the countries are not able to reach an agreement of climate change. We are trying how an agreement for water resources in general We are sharing the atmosphere, and we cannot reach an agreement. And how reach an agreement about? Now, it exists some organization for coordinate the exploitation of the aquifer. Okay, for the moment, when Egypt needs more water, for example, as a result of the exploitation of the dam, they will ask for water. This water is in my territory, and I am entitled to take this water. And then the impacts, because these aquifers are connected with the river Nile also, then the impact will be in the future. Then it's the reason that we are in risk to make very big mistakes if we don't consider the long-term planification. No?
So we have, like, many water association organization, world organization. We have, when you go to Water Environmental Federation, you get many organizations in Europe, and it seems if as leaders, if we can help create an overseeing organization that would work with yourselves. I mean, you're a member in one of the organizations, and then you're representing Uganda as a country. So the idea is that to create policies that are homogeneous or as much as possible, that would balance between use, extraction, abstraction, and replenishing. And then, anything that goes for a project like environmental project, like what happens across the European Union, Canada, US, and North America, is that it goes for review, and it say, okay, you're gonna extract, where's the replenishment side? Like, what are you gonna have? You take 10 gallons out, are you going to put 8 gallons back in? And where it's coming from? And then it would just balance the situation. I don't think it will be very complicated. I think it's lacking is the initiative. It's like what, you're identifying that there could be a big mistake, but you're not identifying what could be done about it. I mean, just creative ideas create debate, and debate creates initiatives. Initiatives create actions to do something, and that's what's lacking. In that regard.
Maybe just want to pose a challenge. I don't know if my brother here is aware that River Congo has over 250 billion cubic meters of water per annum, per day. And River Nile has only 85 billion cubic meters. Have you thought of using River Congo to power water to Africa? Because right now it is just pouring water into the sea, the ocean.
Here in Spain, we try the same with the Ebro, that is to use the Ebro for put water into the rest of Spain. And inside the world, recovery was impossible.
Okay.
Politics. Yes, politics.
Okay.
Inside
Now,
our own country.
That's what I'm saying. I think if you think differently, you have to make water management independent of government.
But that's impossible.
no, but
And it's insane, because who is going to take the decisions? Because at the end of the day, governments is logically, okay, normally they are democracies and they have their own sovereignty. Then, it's a very difficult question. It's because of that we are here. If not, there is no sense of this meeting. But anyway, from trying to go to the practical approach, you have come here, you have done a lot of effort. Here you have a lot of innovative ideas. In our case, we are quite interested in low-cost technologies. For us, low-cost technologies, because it's what we have to do in Africa. And if I may, here in Spain we have a drama. For example, we have big corporates that they are not interested in innovate in waste management in water. Why? Because they have more benefits. Then how to help innovative low-cost technologies, normally from startups, to solve the problem? water desalinization, water sanitization, wastewater. Okay. If I may, it's quite interesting what the European Commission is proposing at the moment for Africa under DEFCO DG. We can say is the first donor in all over the world. We're talking of a lot of money, but of course it has to be logical projects. Now there are some calls. I'm not going to explain that. But anyway, if 2 years ago, and it could inspire you, the people that are working in the land in Africa, they did the Africa Startup Europe Awards. It was in general, and it was quite successful. Innovative startups with innovative ideas, low-cost technologies. It was financed by the DG DEFCO. Why not you, from Uganda, from whatever, why not to knock the door of the DEFCO, we can help to you, in promoting this kind of dissemination and open innovation methodology for scouting that innovative companies that could go there with the financial support from the European Union, is the concept. If it could be. What do you think?
First, I would like to answer you, but before, one point regarding the proposal of the Congo. You know, the moving the water from one country to another is very complicated. The only case is in Colorado River. That is, the Colorado is flowing in Mexico, not in, and it's a big trouble within the countries. But in the Congo is the main hydropower station project in the world. Is the Inga project. It's 46,000 megawatts. That means it's 100 nuclear reactors. 100 of nuclear reactors. But what is the problem of this project? It would be more than twice the Three Gorges project in China. Is moving the electricity is much easier than the water. But the problem is moving the energy from this, because Congo has no demand for so big amount of energy. But they want to sell this energy to other places. Even in Europe, there are an idea, a big line, more than 1 million of watts. But this is almost impossible. In terms of energy, the energy is the most easy thing to export. But even in this case, also the project, the Grand Renaissance, has demand from Saudi Arabia and other countries, not for the consumption. This is very complicated for energy, and not for water. Is totally crazy. And on the opposite is we are dealing with very big projects where there are a lot of finance, a lot of interest of private companies. If you move to the most local, now the question is not low-cost technology, but appropriate technology. That means that the technology is appropriate to the community where you want to work, and it's a big effort to be adapted to these characteristics of each community, each part of the world. No. I agree with you. That we need to work in this direction, and not to export our ideas, but to find the most suitable solution for each part. And all the European programs are promoting this kind of solutions. But the problem is that the companies which are really interested to work in this direction.
At the end of the day, solutions and technology exist, but the problem is the low-cost technologies that solve sometimes in a more efficient way. They don't have a big team for networking or for commercialization, and then, of course, thanks information society and public administration as the European Commission, we can spread the challenge from a concrete region, city, or country, publishing, okay, my challenge is whatever, management of sludge, water depuration, desalinization, spreading through the Startup Europe network from the European Commission to do what? To identify real startups with real solution, low-cost technologies. And then with that technology, yes, you can knock the door of the European Commission to obtain subsidy from the DG DEFCO. And we can work in that.
Okay, thank you very much. You.
I like the idea of appropriate technology, and the approach we use, for example, in Uganda, is not to buy technology, is to make our own technology through collaboration with people who are doing it and who are willing to work with us to develop our own solutions. The only way you can reduce the cost of technology is for you to create your own technology. Now, the European Union, I don't think the problem of Africa is a lack of money. The problem of Africa is actually poor mindsets. The not knowing that these are things you can do, not knowing that these are things you need to use to drive efficiency. So we don't suffer from where money is. We suffer from bad mindsets. And for me, that's where we are trying to focus in my own organization. And the moment you have the right mindset, you know what to do, getting money is never a problem. Whether from the European Union or from the World Bank or from the AFD or from KFW, money is never a problem. What is a problem is that most of us always don't know what to do and want to rely on others to tell us what to do.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mugisha, for this comment. And I think we conclude with that one, our session, because I think that is very good in terms of, I think what we discussed are solutions are there, but we have to be really mindful on how to use the potential we have in the water to supply the countries in Africa. And it needs to be appropriate technology that needs to be implemented. It needs to be at a fair cost as well, that can be used efficiently by the population. And the mindset has to be right in terms of implementing all of that so it can work on a sustainable basis. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for your questions. And have a nice rest of the day.